Yeah, so switch statements are basically just fancy if blocks. How's it? And welcome to this week's C# video, where we're going to be talking about switch statements. So for today, we're largely just going to be using sharplib. So if you go to sharplib.io, you can see this little playground. And the basic way it works is you get to choose what your language is. So in our case, we're going to be using C#. You can target which branch you want to use for .NET. So in our case, we're using the x64 platform, but we could also go and change this to main, and you can see on the 10th of January 2024 is the last time that this was updated. Or you can go and look at one of the sort of C# next branches that's hanging around. And then for the results, we're largely going to be using simplified C#, but you can also drop it down to IL, which we will use a little bit, or you can run the code. But as I mentioned, we're just going to be using these two today. And then the last thing you can do is view the code as if it was run through the debug configuration or the release. So you can see in this case, we've got a very simple bit of code here. So we say var s equals string.empty, and then we console.writeline s. And you can see in the simplified C#, var is replaced with string because that's what it looks like. And if we switch over to the release configuration, you can see that this whole line is removed because it is actually redundant. And then that string.empty is just written directly to the console. So for all the demos today, we're going to keep this in the release configuration. Let's get going. So before we look at our first switch statement, let's just look at a basic if block, because sometimes the switch statement generates very similar code. So in this case, if I had the day of the week and I wanted to see what day of the week it is and then write to the console some text based of that, I could do something like if day equals 1, then we should console write Monday. So we're going to say this is Monday. And that would write out. And then if we wanted to do the same for Tuesday, we could go add something like this. We could even change this to say else if it's a Tuesday. And then lastly, we could say else console write star 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 because we don't know what day it is. Now, if we had to convert that code to be a switch statement, the way it would work is we'd say switch on day, which is an integer. We'd say for the case where it is 1, we want to write out Monday. For the case where it's 2, we want to write out Tuesday. And the default case, if it's anything else, we want to write out the star star star. So if we look at the simplified C# for this, you'll see it looks very similar to what we had before. In this case, lots of the conditions are inverted. So we have day of the week not 1, then we'll check if day of the week equals 2, write out Tuesday, else write out the star star star. And then in the case where this was 1, we write out Monday. Very similar to what we had before. But now what happens if we add one more condition? So say we wanted to add Wednesday. So we're going to say, for the case of Wednesday, and make that 3. Well, now the simplified C# looks very similar to the code that we have on the left-hand side. The only difference here is that this line is redundant, so it's been taken out. So you can see that we are switching directly on day of the week, and we do a case for its Monday, case for its Tuesday, case for its Wednesday. And now if we have to look at the IL code for this, you can see our switch statement here by instruction 11, where it's got the 3 different cases that we have, which point to 24, 2F, and 3A. 24 is Monday, 2F is Tuesday, and 3A is Wednesday, with the default fall through being 45, which is directly after that. Okay, so let's load up all the days of the week using the enum instead of the integers, just so it's easier to read. And I want to show you something really interesting that happens with switch statements. So we'll start off here quickly by jumping into the IL. So you can see here that we have our switch statement, which has got all our days of the week in it. So it starts with 74 and then goes to 32. And the reason for that is that Sunday in the enum is actually 0, with Monday being 1, and then the rest of the days of the week continuing from there. And the reason that this is interesting is because internally .NET's going to get a base value using the lowest value in the case, and then use that to effectively index into the instruction that it needs to execute. So Sunday will be first, and then Monday, because Sunday is 0, and then Monday is 1. What's really cool is say we delete Wednesday. What we'll now notice is that we've got 74 in the switch statement, which also happens to be our default. So what the compiler is doing in this case is it's saying, actually, it's going to be a lot quicker for us to just throw in the default value at this position instead of doing a branch and then having two separate switch statements. And because of that, if this value happens to be 3, which is for a Wednesday, we're going to automatically go through to our default code, which is saying unknown day. So what if we do a switch on a string? So in this case, all I'm doing is taking the day of the week and making that toString, and then we're switching on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, with the rest of the logic all being the same. In this case, you'll notice that we don't get a nice switch statement like we did earlier when we're using the enums or the integers. And the reason for that is, if you can remember a little bit ago, I mentioned that the framework was effectively indexing into the instruction that it needs to execute. And for that to happen, it needs the cases that it's looking at to be sequential. And strings aren't numbers, so we can't do the same thing that we can do with numbers to strings, which is use them efficiently in a case statement. So what about with chars? So in this case, I'm going to take that toString and I'm just going to get the first letter of the string. So that in this case, then I will be doing a case on M, T, and W, and then just change the output slightly. If we look at the simplified C# for this, you can see that the result is very much the same that we had when we had strings. So I'm going to go and just fill out the rest of the week quickly. And you can see when I've added in Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as well, we get a lot of branching still, but we have this case statement in the middle here that works for a couple of the days of the week. So what's actually happening here? Well, if we look at the IL, you'll see that we've got 77, 56, and 61, which are our days of the week. And then we've got 82 in there twice, which is our default value. So what the compilers decided for us in this case is the most efficient way to do the matching here is to insert 2 extra values for what would be U and V. And that then gives us 5 sequential numbers, which we can then index into. Okay, so lastly, what happens if we have 2 enums like this? One is an error list that goes sequentially. So in this case, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, obviously missing 13 there. The other one, not going sequentially, so 100, 200, 400, 500, and 600. Now in the first case, because those numbers are sequential, as we've seen multiple times in this video, that's going to result in a normal case statement. The IL for this will automatically insert the default value to compensate for that 3 that's missing. The rest of it is the standard switch. For the enum that's going up in 100s, which is quite common when people want to group their error codes, that's going to form branching. Now, straight off the bat, you're probably going to panic and say, I need to go and change all my error codes to be sequential so that the code can use switch statements, so it can index into stuff, so that it can be more performance. Hold up. I ran a very basic benchmark on this exact example, just to show you that even though this is a very simple example, the performance difference isn't that much between these 2 examples. In both cases, the compiler is going to do its best to create the most optimal code it can, given the values that are being switched on. So that's all I have to share with you today around switch statements. If you find any of this helpful, please remember to like and subscribe if you're not currently. Leave any comments down below if you have any ideas of what you want me to look into next, or if you want more information about switch statements. You can find me on any of my socials. Yeah, thank you so much. Until next time, cheers.